The night Elias Vance found out his wife might be dying, he didn't cry, he calculated. Rain hammered against the tinted windows of his black Rolls-Royce as he sat outside the Manhattan Diagnostic Center, staring at the medical report that read Stage 4, aggressive, terminal. Sarah Vance had 6 months, maybe less. The same woman who had smiled at him across charity galas and private penthouse dinners now had a ticking clock attached to her name. Elias didn't hesitate. He opened his tablet, ready to liquidate 3 commercial properties in downtown New York, his voice cold as he drafted emails to fund an experimental Swiss treatment that could cost him nearly everything. But before he hit send, his phone rang. "Don't do it yet," his mother Lydia's voice cut through. "If you give her everything now, you'll never know who she really is. Tell her the illness is yours instead." Elias froze. It was cruel, but doubt, small, poisonous, took root. That night he sat across from Sarah in their glass-walled living room overlooking Central Park. "The results came back," he said quietly. "It's me. I'm the one who's sick." For a moment, silence stretched between them like a fracture in glass. Then Sarah blinked once. No tears, no trembling, just a slow, unreadable shift in her expression. "How long?" she asked. 3 months, Elias lied. And that was the moment everything changed. Within 48 hours, the warmth in the Vance household evaporated. Sarah's mother, Mrs. Gable, moved into the guest wing without asking. The house staff began receiving new instructions. Elias noticed it in the small things: his access card delayed, his study rearranged, his accounts quietly restricted. Then came dinner. Mrs. Gable sat at the table like she owned it, sipping wine. "Elias," she said, almost kindly, "we've been reviewing your holdings. Given your condition, it's only responsible to begin transferring assets to Sarah. We don't want legal complications later." Elias's fork stopped mid-air. "I was considering selling the downtown property for treatment. There's a chance I could extend my life." Sarah's eyes snapped up instantly. "That's selfish," she said flatly. "You're already dying. Why gamble away my future for a few extra weeks of suffering?" The words landed harder than he expected. Not grief, not fear, calculation. Mrs. Gable nodded approvingly. "Exactly. A man in your position should think about legacy, not desperation." Elias slowly set his fork down. For the first time, he realized he wasn't a house anymore. He was in a negotiation. By the end of the week, it became a siege disguised as care. Passwords changed, accounts frozen, documents appeared on his desk for future planning signatures. When Elias tried to access their joint trust for a medical consultation, the bank flagged it as unauthorized. Sarah didn't even look away from her laptop when he confronted her. "We're protecting you from yourself. You're not thinking clearly. I'm your husband. You're supposed to want me alive." Sarah finally looked at him then, and what he saw wasn't hatred. It was detachment. "If I were dying, I'd want you to keep the money and live well. That's what love is, Elias, not waste." Something inside him shifted, not broken, reorganized. That night he opened his safe and pulled out a second sealed medical report, one that didn't belong to him, one that had Sarah's name on it. The first crack in Elias Vance's world didn't come from illness, it came from the way Sarah looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Cold, measured, already halfway gone. The diagnosis had said terminal, stage 4, aggressive, unstoppable. At least that was what Sarah believed. Elias sat alone in the back of his black Rolls-Royce outside St. Augustine Medical Center, the encrypted report glowing on his tablet as rain slid down the tinted windows like slow judgment. His name wasn't on the file. Hers was, because the dying man wasn't Elias Vance at all. It was the story he had allowed them to believe. The phone buzzed once. His assistant. "Her mother is moving in tonight, sir," as instructed. Elias didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the clinic doors where Sarah had just walked out 30 minutes earlier, pale, trembling, holding the fake prognosis like it weighed more than her marriage. He should have stopped it then, ended the deception before it grew teeth. But then Lydia's voice returned to him, cold, surgical, deliberate. "If she thinks you're dying, she'll show you exactly who she is before the end." And Elias wanted to know. The driver shifted. "Sir, do we proceed with the transfer of assets to the Swiss fund?" Elias finally exhaled. Not yet, because now it wasn't about saving himself anymore. It was about seeing what she would do when she thought there was nothing left to lose. That night, Sarah didn't cry. Not fully, not cruelly, just gradually, like distance was a medical necessity now. First it was, "I need to handle calls downstairs." Then, "I can't risk getting emotionally overwhelmed before work tomorrow." Until one evening, she simply didn't come to bed at all. Elias noticed everything. He always did. But he played his part. The coughing, the slower movements, the occasional pause too long before answering simple questions. Every detail carefully designed to reinforce a truth Sarah was already beginning to use as permission, not pain. The real change, though, wasn't in Elias, it was in her. One evening he found her in the penthouse office, speaking softly on the phone. "Yes, I understand the volatility risk." A pause, then colder. "No, I'm not emotionally attached to holding it long term. It's a liquidation strategy now." Elias stood in the doorway and watched her. He didn't interrupt. She ended the call, turned and saw him. "You should be resting," she said, immediately, not concern, procedure. He stepped inside slowly. "Who are you selling?" A flicker, just a flicker, then gone. "Non-essential holdings," she replied. "We agreed on restructuring." "We didn't agree on liquidation." Sarah closed the laptop with calm precision. "Elias, you're not going to be here to manage them. I am, so I'm making sure nothing collapses after." After. That word again. Not if, not when. After. He watched her nod slowly, as if a man too weak to argue. "You're changing," he said quietly. She didn't even deny it. "I have to," she answered simply. "People don't survive emotionally in situations like this. They adapt." There it was. Adapt. Not grieve, not suffer. Adapt. As if he was already a closed chapter. The next morning, Mrs. Gable arrived earlier than usual, carrying folders instead of food. She didn't even pretend anymore. "Sarah is doing the right thing," she said while pouring coffee like she owned the kitchen. "You'd be proud of her, Elias. She's thinking clearly now." Elias looked at her over the rim of his glass. "Clearly." Mrs. Gable smiled faintly. "You're slipping away. She's protecting what remains." Sarah didn't look at him when she added, "We've started reallocating assets into safer instruments, high liquidity, lower risk exposure." "My companies," said Elias softly. "Our companies," she corrected immediately. "We built this together." A lie so smooth it almost sounded real. Elias sat down slowly, as if the weight of the conversation was tiring him more than it should. "And if I don't die?" The room went still. Not shocked, not emotional, still. Like the question itself was inconvenient. "Elias," said Sarah carefully, "you need to accept reality. The doctors were clear." He watched her closely now. "Doctors can be wrong."
A pause stretched too long. This time, something darker slipped into her voice. "You're starting to think irrationally. That's part of the decline. Confusion, denial." Denial. She was diagnosing him now. Elias almost smiled, again, but instead he lowered his gaze as a man losing grip. "Maybe you're right," he whispered. And that's all she needed, because from that moment on, Sarah stopped treating him like a husband and started treating him like a closing liability. She began making decisions without him, not secretly, openly. "I've already approved the property restructuring," she told him one evening. "The downtown asset will be sold by next week." "That was mine before us," said Elias quietly. "Was," she repeated. The word hit harder than intended. Every day after that, she grew more detached, more precise, more emotionally unreachable, until even silence between them felt structured. But the most dangerous change wasn't her coldness, it was her confidence, because she no longer hesitated when speaking about his death. She planned it like a date on a calendar. And Elias let her, because he was watching something else unfold underneath her certainty, the way fear of loss was slowly transforming into entitlement, the way grief was mutating into control, the way love, once removed from emotion, becomes something far more ruthless entirely. One night, he caught her alone again in the office, reviewing legal drafts with her mother standing behind her like a shadow. "We need stronger protection clauses," Sarah said. "If Elias passes unexpectedly, there should be no room for disputes. Everything should transfer immediately." Her mother nodded. "Smart girl." Elias leaned against the doorway. "Immediately," he repeated quietly. Sarah looked up. "Yes." A beat. "Why?" Elias studied her face for a long moment. Not anger, not grief, not even fear, just certainty. That was the most dangerous part of all. "No reason," he said finally, turning away. Sarah watched him go, but what she didn't notice was the faint shift in Elias's expression as he left the room. For the first time since this began, Elias wasn't playing the dying man anymore. He was studying the beginning of her undoing. And somewhere deep in the system of contracts she was building around his supposed death, Elias was already making sure she would survive exactly what she was planning, just not the way she expected. The trap was set, but she hadn't heard it click yet. The illusion of Elias Vance dying didn't break Sarah Gable overnight. It hardened her. It turned something soft in her into something sharper, quieter, and far more dangerous. She stopped sitting beside him at night, not abruptly, not cruelly, just gradually. The change didn't announce itself. It crept into Sarah's life the way power always does when it begins to feel justified. She started sleeping less, not from grief, but from pressure. Calls from brokers, lawyers, asset managers, decisions stacked on decisions, until every hour felt like it belonged to someone else's survival strategy rather than her own marriage. Elias watched it all from the margins of their life. He had become something quieter in the house now, not absent, not present, but observational. A man people walked around like fragile glass, the dying husband everyone spoke about carefully, as if tone alone could delay inevitability. But behind his lowered eyes, Elias was mapping her. Every cold sentence, every financial decision made without hesitation, every time she said, "after you're gone," like she was discussing weather patterns instead of a human life. And the most important pattern of all, how quickly she adapted to the idea of him disappearing. That night, the penthouse felt different, not quieter, structured, like even silence had been negotiated. Sarah stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to her ear, voice calm and professional. "Yes, finalize the offshore transfer. No emotional exposure. I don't want delays if anything happens suddenly." Suddenly, Elias stood behind her, leaning lightly on the frame of the doorway. Suddenly, he repeated. Sarah turned slightly, not startled, just interrupted. Yes, she said, medical conditions don't follow schedules. Elias studied her face. And you're prepared for that. I have to be. No hesitation, no crack in her tone, just inevitability dressed as responsibility. He nodded slowly. So if I died tonight, everything would already be in motion. Sarah didn't flinch. That's what made it worse. Yes, she answered simply. That's the point of planning. A silence stretched between them, heavier than anything emotional. Elias stepped into the room. You've changed, Sarah. She finally looked at him properly now. No, she said softly, I've adapted. That word again. Adapted. Not mourned, not loved, not held on. Adapted. Elias exhaled faintly, like he was tired rather than wounded. You used to hesitate. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Hesitation gets people killed in business. And in marriage, he asked. For the first time, something flickered behind her composure. Not guilt, not sadness, annoyance. As if he was slowing down progress. This isn't about marriage anymore, she said. That line landed cleaner than anything else she had ever said. Elias nodded once, almost approvingly. I see. Sarah turned back to the window, already moving on mentally. The lawyer will finalize the updated clauses tomorrow. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner. Like he was paperwork. Like grief had been optimized into efficiency. Elias watched her for a long moment before speaking again. And your mother? Sarah didn't turn around. She's making sure nothing is left vulnerable. Vulnerable, he repeated again. A faint pause. Then he said quietly, You've started speaking like you're already alone. That finally made her look back. There it was, just a small shift in her expression, not emotion, recognition, because she realized what he meant. Not that she was alone, but that she had already mentally removed him from the equation, before death, before confirmation, before truth. And that realization should have unsettled her. Instead, she straightened slightly. It's not personal anymore, Elias. It's necessary. Then she walked past him, close enough for him to catch her perfume, close enough to feel how far she already was. Later that night, Elias received another encrypted update from his private investigator. She's accelerating asset consolidation. Also, she asked the legal team what happens if a spouse is declared terminal but later found to have misrepresented condition. She's covering every angle. Elias stared at the screen for a long moment, not surprised, confirming. Then he typed one reply. Good, let her build the cage properly. He set the phone down and looked out over the city lights of Manhattan. High above everything, where people believed power was visible. But Elias knew better now. Power wasn't visibility, it was timing, and Sarah Gable, brilliant, precise, emotionally sharpening herself into something unrecognizable, had just made her first irreversible mistake. She had started preparing for his death too efficiently, too confidently, too completely. Because when someone builds a future that requires you to be gone, they stop asking whether you ever truly will be. And downstairs, in the same building, Sarah was signing another document that would tighten the net even further, unaware that Elias Vance had already stopped playing the dying man and started studying the execution of her certainty. Sarah didn't notice the shift immediately because she was too deep in the structure she was building, too consumed by the clean logic of control she believed she now held over Elias's fading existence. Every document she signed felt like progress, every transfer of power felt like protection, and every legal clause felt like survival. She no longer questioned whether it was cruel, because in her mind, cruelty had been replaced with necessity, and necessity had replaced love. Elias watched it all without interruption, his presence in the penthouse becoming quieter by design, his weakness more convincing with each passing day, and the more fragile she believed he was, the more absolute she became in her decisions. One evening, she returned from a meeting to find him sitting alone in the dim light of the living room, not coughing, not performing, just watching the skyline like a man measuring something unseen. "You should be in bed," she said automatically, already distracted by her phone. "I'm fine," Elias replied softly, too softly, and that alone made her pause for half a second before she dismissed it. "The lawyers finalized the last clause today," she added, placing her bag down. "Everything is secure now. If anything happens, there will be no complications, no delays, no disputes." No delays for who? The question wasn't loud, but it carried weight she couldn't immediately interpret. Sarah sighed as if the answer was obvious. For everyone involved, for me, for the company, for the estate, for the transition. Transition, not loss, not grief, transition. Elias nodded slowly, as if absorbing something he already knew. "You've thought of everything, then?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, then softened her tone slightly out of habit rather than emotion. "That's what I have to do now." There was a silence after that, not awkward, just empty of shared meaning. Elias stood slowly, walking towards the window, his reflection layered over the city lights. "If I told you I wasn't afraid of dying," he said quietly, "would you still be doing all this?" Sarah frowned slightly, not because the question hurt her, but because it didn't fit the system she had built. "It's not about fear, it's about order." That word again, order, as if his life had become a process to be managed rather than a bond to be held. Elias let out a faint breath that almost looked like a smile but never reached it. "You've become very good at this," he said, "at letting go." Something flickered in her expression this time, not emotion but discomfort, quickly buried under logic. "I'm doing what's responsible," she said more firmly. "And what's responsible," Elias echoed, turning slightly towards her now, "is making sure you're protected when I'm gone." "Exactly," she agreed immediately. That agreement landed heavier than she realized, because Elias didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her face in a way that made her feel briefly like she had said something wrong without knowing what it was. Then he nodded once. "Then you've already made your decision," he said calmly. Sarah hesitated. Elias, but he raised a hand slightly, not to stop her, just to pause her. "It's all right," he said. "I understand now." And for the first time, something about his calm unsettled her more than his illness ever had. That night, after she went to bed, Elias received another encrypted update from his legal team, confirming what she had done. Every clause she insisted on was now binding, airtight and irreversible upon her declared death. He stared at the screen for a long moment, not reacting, not resisting, just confirming the shape of the trap she believed she had built around his absence. Then he typed one line in reply. "She's not securing my death, she's securing her belief in it." And somewhere deep in the structure she thought protected her future, Elias Vance finally saw the exact moment Sarah Gable stopped loving him without realizing she had started preparing to own what she thought she would inherit.